if there's ever a plan in place for a World Cup, there's always a curveball in there. There's always that something happens.
How do you counter the box kick, the high ball, and especially with this revamped rule where pretty much whoever is chasing that kick gets, a direct hit on you or freer access to you?
There's a bunch of under-20s that went really well this year. And there's a bunch of players that need to do some hard yards, but are on the path.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network, is proudly brought to you by Novus Glass. If you're travelling around the country this summer to a local or an international sporting event and you get a chip or crack in your windscreen, and it can happen, as soon as you notice it, Novus it. Windscreen repair or replacement is easy with Novus Glass. 68 branches around the country. So just call or drop into your local branch direct. Whether it's a cracked windscreen from a rogue cricket ball or a chip from a rogue stone on the road, get it sorted with Novus Glass. Notice it, Novus it.
Welcome to the DSPN.
Team New Zealand's in trouble.
Oh, he's done it again, Ricky Herbert.
The Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
DSPN, Martin Devlin, Lachlan Moore, and a very special guest on the show today. As always, click that subscribe button for us on the DSPN YouTube channel, alerts, leave us a comment, all of that. He's the president of New South Wales Rugby, also the Waratahs. He's a legendary Wallaby himself, playing for over 10 years between 1993, 04, 81 caps. And one of the presenters on Stan Sport, alongside Tim and Morgs, who are great friends of the show as well. We really welcome, very special privilege for us, Matt Burke. G'day, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, Martin. I'm well. Mate, you put me up with that company with Morgs and Tim Horan. I'm happy with that. That's good company, as you say.
Yeah, look, I want to ask you a little bit about that because it's a great commentary team. Look, and I especially love Morgs. I've done a couple of gigs with him and he just creates something completely different every time that team gets together. So we will. What a background you've got. What a day in Sydney at the moment, mate.
I know. It's been hitting 40 degrees. We played golf yesterday with a few of the boys, and it was blowing a gale. I hit a couple of good shots. I hit a couple of very poor shots. So I think I hit a couple on the road yesterday, but not a bad part of the world to be in at this time of the year. And obviously, with a draw that sort of went through the other day, it sort of got everyone, amped up again and talking about the rugby after what was a frustrating tour from the Wallabies perspective. We're sitting in getting ready for Christmas in downtown Sydney.
Yeah, I'm going to get on to that Northern Tour, obviously, but just in terms of the World Cup draw, we are playing you in the opening match. Let's get that established. I mean, it's just a gift, isn't it, that it's the All Blacks and the Wallabies to kick that World Cup off?
Well, I mean, you look at the way it always sets up. It's the host nation always plays that first game, and what a way to set up the tournament off with a bang against New Zealand. And I love the little cutaways of Dan Carter talking about it beforehand. Wouldn't it be great to see Australia, New Zealand, and then when it actually evolved, the smirk on his face. Look, there's nothing better. That Anzac rivalry. You go back when we played, and we had such an incredible time playing against those boys. And I even though South Africa are number one in the world, and they've got that that number beside their name, I always believe that the Kiwis are the ones that you set yourself against. I think they're the most rounded in their footballing sense that they can take onto the park. And so that first game in Perth, Optus Stadium, cracking joint. It'll be full of people, not only from obviously Australia, New Zealand, but obviously the world's coming down. What a great way to start a tournament. And when you look at the connotations for it down the track in regards to pool matches and where you end up, massive connotations and massive sort of scenarios setting up a couple of weeks down the track.
Yeah, and initially our reaction is hell. We're meant to be ranked second in the world. How did it happen that 1 and 2 in the world as the rank now get on that side? But whoever wins or loses that match, it looks like either a quarterfinal against South Africa or England. Neither of those matches is easy. We've just seen that.
Yeah. And look, Australia ranked 7 in the world. From that last Test match last year. In that September tour, they didn't get into that top band. You can't map your way through a World Cup. That's probably the biggest one. And if I go back to that 99 time when we won, we played that game against South Africa in Twickenham, and we drove down to Cardiff and watched the Kiwis play against the French. And the most disappointed bloke in the whole room was our video analyst because he had everything lined up for New Zealand to watch and sort of go through, and he literally had to wipe it from the table and start again with the French. And so, if there's ever a plan in place for a World Cup, there's always a curveball in there. There's always that something happens, and when you're playing these teams, very close at the top. One to six, 1-7 in amongst it. You could say, chuck in a Scotland in there as well. We saw Fiji put on some really good performances this year as well. So there will be some curveballs. So what I'm saying is. You can't sort of pre-map a path to a final, but it is interesting though, Martin, as you said. We seem to be the only sport that doesn't contrive sort of getting to the point where you get one and two playing in a final. Tennis do it. The football
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
in a way do it. And as you said, we could see a heavyweight clash in a quarter final.
Just looking at that World Cup, and it's so easy to just get over-focused on it now. It is still the best part of 2 years away. We've got a lot of rugby. We play South Africa 6 times before a potential quarterfinal. So, and obviously 4 times next year as well. Is it easy for you to do that at the moment, to think, okay, let's just leave that because anything can happen and we've got all of this time to actually develop, rather than getting too bogged down in it, saying, oh my God, we can't win a World Cup at home now because of look at what's happened this year?
Yeah, it's so true. And for an Aussie perspective, we get Les Kiss in halfway through next season. Joe Smith has left, I think, the team in a good place, albeit that tour, which we'll talk about in a minute. But there seems to be certainly after that Lions series, there was a real sort of Aussie spirit again. As I said, even though that they were ranked 7 in the world, there was this ability to be able to create a bit of national pride again, pride in the jersey. The crowds were huge when they folded around, and albeit that had to do with the fanfare of the Lions that hadn't been there for 12 years. But then they had that win over South Africa, and the biggest question was, how long can you have that win in South Africa in the bank for before you start to sort of slide and forget about it? And I think at the moment, that tour certainly put I suppose a real microscope under sort of where they are, and I think that's exactly where they are. They're 7 in the world at the moment. They can compete for a while. And I spoke at a players' luncheon the other day with Morgs, and just spoke about the consistency that they need. And when you go through history, that consistency from an Australian perspective, so when we played was very strong. We were able to understand what to do, how to get around the park. This team's got talent. It just needs to be able to do it for longer periods of time to sustain that. So, you need to be big, strong, fast these days. That most of the teams are. But if you're bogging down, as I said, if you're bogging down, you said just then, Martin, if you're looking 2 years ahead, you're planning, way too far ahead to be able to construct a flow chart, if that's the word, to get to a final. There's going to be so many permutations going through there with injuries. This is across the board. Injuries.
Yeah.
Coaches are under pressure. Coaches are changing. Your guy's under pressure at the moment. So, how does it all end up, and how does it all sort of pan out in 2 years' time is the great anomaly, and it's what everyone's looking forward to.
Yeah, you look back at your era, and it was just such a great era, and it was World Cup win in 91, on to 99, and then those 3 years, 00, 01, 02, and you breaking our hearts and retaining that Bledisloe with a 1-1 draw all through that. You had some world-class players, some absolute generational players. Not that you don't have at the moment, but how do you get back to that? And is that one part of what you need? Because when you look at Australia, it's a long-winded question, I'm sorry, but when you look at Australia and think, if you can put your best team out there, that's as competitive as. We saw it at Ellis Park. We saw it against the Lions. But how do you do that? And are you confident that you can in time?
Yeah, I take you back to before the Irish game. There was a lot of pressure on the Aussies to do it. And I was sitting there with commentary with Michael Hooper, and we're chatting beforehand. And he basically turned around and looked at me and goes, "Mate, you blokes ruined it for us. You won everything. How are we supposed to follow that?" And we did have a really good era, as you mentioned. I think we had every trophy in the cabinet for that period of time there, from World Cups to Bledisloes to Tri Nations, and the individual countries. And you're right, there was a consistency in amongst the team. And the hard part about, and I imagine it's harder again still as we get bigger, stronger, faster, is to be able to create that team that is able to back up. And we saw it on this tour that you have to be able to have a squad now that backs up and changes personnel throughout the games. The biggest one is like a Will Skelton when he came down. His influence in that line series was
Huge.
you couldn't massive, absolutely massive. And when he held when he held off three of those Lions blokes, sort of by the shirt collar and just sort of ragdolling them, Atoje and crew, I just thought he just does not take any what. So that's what they need, and muscling up with big players is such a massive key these days. If you don't have that strength up front, you may have skill, but if you don't have that size and strength, you're underdone. And that's where we then look at the Box, for example, who are just so locked in with that sort of strength up front. They may not play the best game at times, but they play a power game. And the biggest, I suppose, the biggest question that we get here is we haven't had a number 10. We can't get a number 10. We're not developing number 10s. I think we are developing number 10s, but until we get those blokes up front, which is such a difficult thing to do, to compete with those guys at the front there. That 10 role. Remember when you're playing as a kid, if the forwards go forward, the world's easiest position is playing the backs, and a number 10 when you're going forward. If you're going back, life's tough, especially under the new rules new laws that have sort of come in, and the speed of the game now, the defense that is just off the line so far. Actually, that's my biggest gripe. No one is onside anymore. No one
ridiculous,
is onside
mate.
anymore.
Absolutely ridiculous.
It is. It's difficult enough to play.
I've been a huge, proponent for, and I know that, people think, it's going to make it look ugly. Bollocks. Do what the NFL do and put 5 metre lines and dotted lines. And as soon as you've got it, there's the foot line. And it makes it so easy for the assistant referee just to go, there, you're offside. You're offside. First one gets a pen, second one gets yellow carded, third time it stops. It just seems, in terms of getting those players, you've got guys like Suali'i, who's just a fantastic athlete, and what an asset he would be to any team. Where do you get them from in the immediate future? Because they are in Australia, they are playing other sports, and I know that you guys have to compete with so many other sports as opposed to what we do or what South Africa do. Where do you find them from? Do you have to write big checks for these players, or genuinely do you think they can come through?
Yeah, well, Joey, in the point of Joey, yes, it was a big check a couple of years ago, and look, they created a lot of hype, and it's certainly got people sort of talking about rugby again. Joey's been he's been great for Waratahs. He got injured a little bit. He got that knock on the jaw that sort of set him out for a while. He had a bad toe for a while. And you just realised it's two different games. The rugby league game and the rugby union game, two different games. And so where do we choose from? And I know that there's been a lot of talk about R360 and Zach Lomax at the moment. From our point of view, and the latest one you read is Zach Lomax wants to come over and play rugby union, and have a shot at the World Cup. And I think even the Brumbies maybe got spoken about the other day. And I look at that and go, do we need him? Probably not. There's talent in the room. There's a bunch of under 20s that went really well this year. There's a bunch of players that need to do some hard yards, but are on the path. And I laugh at the when can you? Well, when was the last time he put his head in a ruck or in a maul or sort of tackled and popped off the ground top thing? So it's a completely different game. And I think we have enough talent not to have to go to the other game and chase their talent or be second fiddle because he decided to take have a start in rugby league in rugby union, that R360 that didn't sort of come to fruition. So are we last resort for these guys? And I find it frustrating that sort of they use that as an out. If they genuinely have an interest and have an understanding of the game. I mean, I go back to the Sailor, Takiri and Rogers when they came across. And one of the great ones, they incredible people, incredible players, incredible athletes. And I think if you looked at it, they probably missed maybe the finer points of the game for a while. It took them a while to get into the understanding of where to go. I think Matt Rogers clicked in the end. LT was there. And Wendell, they certainly had some influence on the game. The great one about Lottie Takiri is a couple of years ago now. God, we go back up to Bloemfontein, Waratahs, and we're in the lead. and I said to the momentum was sort of shifting a little bit, and I said to Lottie. I said, they need a different voice from me. I was captain. They need a different voice from me. I said, spark these blokes up, mate. Yeah, you've played Origin, you've played Kangaroos, you've played grand finals. And he sort of gave it, no worries, mate, no worries. And he turned around and he said, righto, boys, heads up. Suck it in. They're taking the penalty. They're going for two. And I said, three in rugby union, mate. And so he just looked at me and went, "Oh, sorry, mate, sorry." So maybe small things, I don't know, but certainly there's enough talent in that rugby ranks that we don't need to have to put and invest. I think because if these guys come across, they'll want a wage that's sort of sky high,
Sure.
and I don't think one they can't afford it, and I know that with the troubles that Rugby Australia had in previous, they don't want to go into that. They don't want to go into that debt again.
Sure.
It would be unwise to go into that again. So there's talent around, and I look forward to that talent coming through and progressing to the big stuff. But if you can, in a roundabout way, getting back to your question, if we can get the best players on the park, like and there's so many. I mean, there's always that article that says homegrown players to the away players. And if we can get those away players, playing and fit, because it's a different style of game that they play from sort of, southern to northern hemisphere.
Sure.
If they can get them fit, this Aussie team is, can be quite ruthless.
Matt, one of the things that we, toing and froing within this country is without the South African teams in Super Rugby, what it has done to our players. Do we have the class, the level of competition, the brutality of competition? Are we winning these competitions too easy? From your perspective, is Super Rugby good enough to get your Wallaby players up to the international level that you need them to be?
Yeah, it's a good question because when we played back in the day of early Super 10, Super 12, 14, 15.
God, there's a few variations, isn't there, when you go through
That's
this?
right. Yeah, I
Hello.
think I may have played Super 8. I think back in the day, I think it was when it was only sort of a couple of teams. Um, the difficulty is the understanding of how to play, and when you're playing South Africa, and we used to, and your boys as well, we used to tour, 2-3 weeks at a time, and so you'd start to understand the level of intensity over there. uh, maybe this new crew doesn't know, what it means to play South African rugby. Like it is the be all and end all. And you go over there, the fans are fanatical. The training. There's fans watching you at training. So there's always people around you, and maybe microscope. Maybe the new crew understands that we've got to go over there, and it's going to be difficult. But to play against that South Africans, and as you said, just the muscling up, I think is probably the big one. So because we maybe had a good understanding of what was coming our way, that elevated your level of competitiveness in the physicality and the brutality in amongst that world rugby. Like it is from what I can see now, and the change from what was our day is the brutality at the contact now. Like it is on. These blokes are coming out making shots that we were, but nothing of the like of this one here. So everything changes, everything gets better, everything gets bigger, stronger, faster. You can never compare eras, but certainly what I say from this mob at the moment is that without the South African blokes in there, I think we don't understand the week to week physicality that is needed, and not taking away anything from this Trans Tasman conference. I think it's brilliant, and as I said, we always pride ourselves on playing against New Zealand teams and playing well against them. But the South Africans offer a different game of different way of playing the game. That brutality, and sometimes when you get that first hit and your eyes are as big as a dinner plate, you're thinking, what's going on here? So because they don't have that, maybe that's just that one of those things that they need to learn to be able to get more and more. So maybe a learning curve for down the track is that you need to play more of those South African games. How are you going to do that in a system where it's only Australia, New Zealand?
So can, between us, we get ourselves, competitive enough playing each other in this Super Rugby competition to that level again, and obviously everyone is chasing South Africa at the moment, and they are number one with the bullet. We all know that.
Yeah. And, they are innovating at the moment. Sometimes a little bit too much. But certainly, when you look at, how the game is played at the moment, and it's a power game at the moment, finesse is there somewhat, but it is all about muscling up. And if you don't muscle up, and that sort of goes to the boys up front, then you can't really play. The as we spoke about before, that offside line, forward passes, it's like they've forgotten how to adjudicate the laws these days. And when you're up against really strong, aggressive teams, you need to be able to play and do that. So, do we have it? Yeah, I reckon we do. There's still that understanding of energy and intensity, I reckon we can still be and of par. Or we've seen that New Zealand obviously are. They're number 2 in the world, and Australia until perhaps that physicality comes back in the game and we can get that real intensity that lasts for long periods of games. We're always going to be around that mark. We'll be competitive, but teams will just get away from us, which is incredibly frustrating. But because you can see the talent that's there.
Now, a couple of quick questions. We'll let you go. One of them just on the technical side of things. If you were playing now, or you're coaching now, or you're asked to help, how do you counter the box kick, the high ball, and especially with this revamped rule where pretty much whoever is chasing that kick gets a direct hit on you or freer access to you? How do you counter that?
Well, I think the first one, I mentioned the other day on one of our coverage at Stan, that I blame Andrew Mertens, my good mate Andrew Mertens, when they hit him at the back there, and let him sort of catch that high ball, which back in the day he didn't really do. That the box kicks become such an integral part of sort of a restart of play, and the restart of play is probably because there's. The breakdown now is sort of non-existent, if that's the word. So you've got to start the play somehow. I would be from an Australian perspective, I would be calling upon our AFL counterparts to learn how to catch in the air, because it is now a real skill. You can't take the ball in your chest anymore. What we did back in the day is no longer. All you're trying to do now is just be a disruptor, stick the hand in the air, get a ricochet, hopefully get a 50-50. And if it goes back your way, you can start again. Then the ball movement gets shifted straight away. So first one is I'd be searching and try and get some AFL specialists in there to try and work out how to kick the ball. That escort one, that direct line of sight. I mean, you are allowed to, what I believe you should be allowed to just to run back in a line. That doesn't sort of, step in front of other people, which you used to the day. And you can always see it in the players' eyes, can't you? They look over the shoulder and they just sort of, nudge on the way through. But if you're genuinely running back, I don't think, the game is sort of direct enough now that, if you're chasing a ball, you should have to be the one to get out of the way. You should, if you're kicking the ball through, you should weave your way through, rather than getting this, a direct line of sight, as you mentioned. It's a part of, it's like a game of chess. You got to weave your way through. You don't just have it's not a free run, if that's a word. They've every law that's made very quickly, the coaches, in smart places, quickly work out an antidote to how to beat that law. So I think one of those could be revised again, just in terms of sort of world rugby, because it's tough enough to be able to catch the ball at the moment, rather than having that free shot. I agree with you there.
The transition over to Les Kiss, is this the right timing and everything else? Should he have been involved on that Northern tour? Is this? I know these two guys like each other and everything else, but the confusion between having a coach who's there, a coach who's coming, the other coach still there, and so forth. Is this a bit messy? It's probably not perfect, but I think what it was that. Well, you look in hindsight now. Maybe Kissy could have taken over that spring tour after Australia lost, all 4 games, and so thrown in the deep end straight away. As it turns out, he's been in and around. I believe he's been in and around, sort of looking how things go. I think probably the biggest thing for an Australian rugby point of view is and where we've sat from a game perspective, being 7 in the world, where we've sat
from a monetary perspective, being sort of, behind the eight ball, I think that the less confusion and the less chopping and changing, I think the better. So, this outfit now that Kissy will come in, I think Australia, hopefully sort of from a high performance point of view, has been able to sort of set something in place that they can take one player, take one coach out and drop another coach in. Still bring his own, some of his own traits, obviously, and some of his own sort of, coaching staff. But I think if it was a throw the baby out with a bathwater type scenario, I think they could have just, I think they could have put a real dent. Australia did that in 23, and it went sideways. And do you blame Jones for sort of for that scenario? You hear now that he was trying to evoke some kind of change from a constitutional point of view as well. They've gone some way to that with the Waratahs now under the banner of RA, and also Brumbies as well. So, look, maybe there's change for the better. And but certainly, I think we have to get better as a playing group. I think that's probably the overall thing. That when you look at the standards across there, I think they can get better. And that's not saying it as an old bloke and sort of look at me and what I've done.
Sure.
I think that's when you go down to the water cooler, when you go to the coffee shop, that's the chat from the punter as well. There are. I should say there is incredible talent there, and it's just that ability to be able to reproduce that talent over and over and over again. I mean, the irony of it is, and this is my sort of say to a lot of people, we're asking sort of new kids to do things in test matches that they've done for the very first time. So maybe that modelling of into the groups and the high performance and the teams that are playing the junior groups, they need to play more rugby. That's probably the biggest thing. The more rugby, the better. The more questions you get answered, and then the next time you do it, you're not doing it for the first time. So you're not seeing it for the first time when you play a test match against New Zealand or South Africa. And so that repetition of skill is very important for Australian rugby to move forward.
Final question then. It's a great commentary team. Tim is so generous with his time as well. And I really love Morgs. I like him as a person. I love the fact that he's just who he is in that commentary team. And I know that, that means that you are going to polarise people. That's part of it as well. I don't think it's ever over the top. It's Aussie centric, which is what I want when I watch an Australian or listen to an Australian commentary team. If you're listening to a Kiwi, call, if you're listening to a South African call, it's got to be, biased towards that country. That's the whole point of it, and that's the entertainment aspect, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. And look, I think you understand the scenario. Actually, I remember when the Lions played in 2013, I was commentating, and Mum's English, and so if you remember that last game in Sydney, they got belted. It was like Lee Halfpenny had a game and a half. It was like 44 to not many. And Dad rang me up the following day. He goes, "Oh, gee, I tell you what, you were your mother's son last night, weren't you?" And I said, "Why is that?" He says, "Well, you were just pumping up the Lions." I said, "But if they're scoring 44 points, you have to give them credit for being able to do that." So, but if it goes the other way, and the boys like to call me Grandpa Simpson because I shout at clouds, because I'm always on about the forward pass, and I'm always on about the offside line, and which is not getting picked up. And they look at me and go, "Mate," I said, "But it's a blatant forward pass, and so they laugh at me. But it's a good crew, and when you look at the likes of Tim, who's been doing this for a very long time now, speaks well, understands the game well. Morgs understands the game incredibly well. I think he's a level 4 coach. Obviously, did his stuff through the Rebels, back in the day. So he comes out with some stuff sometimes, and I just sort of look at him and go, "I'm not seeing that. How are you seeing that?" And he sort of shines the knuckles type thing, and says, "I've been there, done that." But it's a good crew. I played with Tim. Tim was one of my heroes growing up, and obviously I got then in the team and became great mates with him. And Morgs, he was the young pup when I was sort of running around. So to have these guys and give their experience. And all you're trying to do is, and as you'd know, all you're trying to do is, if someone drops the ball, I don't want to, give them grief for dropping the ball. But what you're trying to do for the people at home is give them an understanding of one, why you dropped the ball, and two, how could you do it better the next time. So, you're explaining sort of, in layman's terms, the nuances of the game. And it's funny. It was funny this year. Nick McArdle said for the Lions Waratahs game, it was wet-ish in Sydney, dewy, and he said it's not that hard out there. And I just stopped and started laughing. I said, mate, it is not hard. It is the hardest thing you've ever come across. You've got the best from Europe coming down. It's wet. It's tough. I said, these guys are under immense amount of pressure, and I think that's probably the biggest thing we don't give. Yeah, correct. We don't acknowledge it is, and the way I explain it to people is that, if you're playing club footy, you have lots of time, lots of space. Time and space is the one you talk about. And as you rise the ranks, you have less time and less space with the ball.
Everyone says that about Test rugby, yeah.
Yeah, and when you see those guys who have got sort of so much time, so much space with the ball,
it's class, isn't it?
It is genuine class, and then you just got to clap that. So and that's what I like, sort of highlighting for the punters, when they watch. But to do it with good blokes, Tim and Morgs especially, you're right. They are good, and they always give you time. And Tim will remind you that he's a 2-time World Cup champion.
Oh, yes, he is.
He will do that. And then we'll remind Morgs that, no, he wasn't a World Cup champion. So it's a bit of niggle and a bit of back and forth. But humility is probably one of their best traits for those two boys. And that's why you love, working with those guys.
Big thanks from the Devlin Sports Podcast team to the Novus Glass team for sponsoring this episode of DSPN. Novus Glass loves backing Kiwis and supporting New Zealand. In fact, every Novus Glass job helps plant native trees. And so far, they've donated over 20,000 native trees. So if your windscreen gets chipped or cracked, it's your chance to make a difference and back the team doing good in New Zealand. Just call your local Novus Glass branch direct. Notice it, Novus it.
DSPN.